Hello, I'm Dr. Wayne Klein. The next 15 minutes or so, um, I'm going to talk about the importance of self-regulation. Now, what is self-regulation? Well, neuropsychologists call it executive functioning or executive control. Aspects of it your grandmother would have called willpower, but it's more than willpower. It's also subtle tricks. It's understanding of the basic mechanisms under with which we function so that we can do things more easily. Brute willpower is tough to constantly use, but there are many other aspects of self-regulation that are more subtle and take less effort. Now, animals don't have to worry about that very much. Dogs have to worry about peeing on the floor and chewing stuff up. But other than that, they can just do whatever they feel like doing. And that's how the animal kingdom really operates. Their emotional brain drives their behavior. There's some thinking involved, but it gets integrated into their feelings and they do what they feel like doing, no problem. But for us, ever since we came down from the trees, it took millions of years, step by step, as our brain grew, and especially the frontal part of our brain. You'll see it in red on the right. That's the frontal lobes in humans, and you can see how they're much bigger than in chimps and in gorillas. Those frontal lobes enable us to have what's sometimes called mental time travel. We can imagine futures, and that enables us to plan. It enables us to delay gratification and do stuff that is just tough for an animal to do. Hunter-gatherers had it pretty easy. Lots of people get up really early in the morning to go hunting or to go fishing and look forward to it for a long time. Though hunter-gatherers, actually, we know now, didn't have to work as hard as everybody's had to work since then, except for the ultra-rich, of course. Once we learned to farm, we had to work by the sweat of our brow. We had to begin planting in the spring, in weed, in hoe. And then in the fall, finally, we'd get to harvest stuff. And we'd have to process it so that it would last all winter. That took planning, that took willpower. If you're hungry, you get up and you do something because you want to eat some fish, or you go gather some berries. But to do something in the spring that you're not going to get rewarded for until the fall, that takes a lot of self-regulation. Then when we move to factories, we have somebody else telling us what to do, but at least we had our own thoughts. When we moved from the Industrial Revolution to sitting in a cubicle, it's hard to do your work in a cubicle, paperwork, while free to think about whatever you want. So more self-regulation is required. And now, for us right now, the ultimate is the self-regulation required by getting on the internet to do some work and avoid all the distractions. That's especially tough for kids who have their homework on the internet now. And the other aspect, which I don't have a slide up here for, is the availability of all kinds of substances that can alter our mind in one way or another and be rewarding in the short term. Avoiding drinking, avoiding smoking, avoiding snorting cocaine, avoiding this drug and that drug. As we improve our technology, our capacity to control our behavior has to get greater and greater. If it doesn't, we end up in big trouble. Now, I'm going to go through various domains of life and show you how self-regulation is important there. For school, everybody who successfully gets through school learns to look like they're paying attention to the teacher. Those who excel actually are paying attention. I taught graduate students for 18 years, and actually also residents. They were already MDs at Harvard Medical School through Spalding. And they were all very good at looking like they were paying attention. Then you ask them questions and you see if they really were. Another aspect of self-regulation in a classroom is avoiding talking to classmates. Then going home and doing homework. These are all gross self-regulatory skills. The more subtle things are the things that happen inside one's head. Nobody can monitor them very easily. So you probably had the experience of reading, but just kind of reading to yourself without paying attention to what you were reading. Contrast that with active reading, where you're really thinking about, wondering whether you agree with the author, trying to anticipate what the author's going to say next. What analogy are they going to use to try to make a point? That's active reading. Active memorizing is the opposite of rote word by word memorization. There are huge differences in outcomes for schooling between people who actively memorize, compare, contrast, um, make different types of categorizations versus a person who just memorizes, spits it back on a test, and forgets about it. For sports, for athletic training, and for maintaining health, self-regulation is of utmost importance. Every day that you fail to put some of the energy of that day back into your physical health, back into your body, you've lost something. Every day you put something in, you've gained something, and you can actually improve your vitality or your strength or your endurance over time if you do that. But if you overdo it, you'll end up doing more harm than good. It takes judgment. So another aspect of self-regulation is judgment. It's not just brute willpower forcing yourself to do stuff. It's also knowing when to stop the exercise, stop lifting weights or whatever, even though it's so much fun and you want to keep going. Self-regulation is extremely important in relationships. Sometimes there are aspects of how we are that really annoys the person we're with. Controlling that will make a dramatic difference. Impulsivity is a dramatic problem affecting relationships. Following old patterns, old scripts versus paying attention and functioning in the present with full awareness makes a huge difference. In child rearing, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, if you're not consciously child rearing, you're not raising your kids. The people who raised you are raising your kids. The reason I say that is that you've learned how to child rear. You've learned how to parent unconsciously through what your parents did. So you're going to act just like them unless you pay attention. Now, if you think you were raised really great, then you're in great shape. If you don't like how you were raised in some way, then self-regulation is essential for you to override your old patterns to act differently. The ability to delay gratification is an important aspect of self-regulation. There's been lots of studies done on this. If you Google the marshmallow effect or don't eat the marshmallow, you can see some funny videos about this. So the basic design is you put a kid in a room with a one-way mirror and say, kid, see this marshmallow? It's yours. You can eat it. But if I walk out of this room, I'm not going to come back for 15 minutes. If when I come back, that marshmallow's still there, then you can have a whole bowl of marshmallows. But if you want to eat it right now, go for it. You can do whatever you want. They videoed the kids, timed how long it took. The average 4.5-year-old would wait about 9 minutes before they ate the marshmallow. Now, the children who waited the longest on follow-up is older adolescents, had higher SAT scores. They were more attentive, better able to concentrate. On follow-up, almost 30 years later, they were less likely to divorce. They were making more money. They were more likely to have gotten through higher education. Now, the cool thing is, I believe that you can train children to improve their ability to delay gratification with simple little ploys. Sleep is essential. We used to think that sleep was deleteriously affected by depression. Now it's looking like in an awful lot of cases, people start to have problems with sleep, and that causes or greatly contributes to the depression. Poor sleep contributes to poor immunity, sexual dysfunction, poor glucose control, weight gain, problems with memory. One of the most important factors, if not the most important factor, in getting a good night's sleep is self-regulation. It's often termed sleep hygiene. When you start winding down for the night, your habits throughout the day, whether you get enough physical exercise, et cetera, et cetera. Addictions. Well, we're told now, with some legitimacy, that addictions are brain-based. People can't help it. Well, I completely disagree that people can't help it. I completely agree that addictions are real. It has to do with what's going on in the brain. But there are thousands and thousands of people who stop smoking, who stop drinking, a smaller number who have gotten off drugs like heroin without any medical interventions. They did it through self-regulation. The most important aspect of self-regulation when it comes to addictions is knowing enough, regulating your behavior well enough so that you don't become addicted to start with. Now, I need to say this again so I'm not misunderstood. Some things are very hard to control. Some things are easy to control. Addictions are extremely hard to control. A child with ADHD, hyperactive impulsive type, can sit perfectly still and focus for a brief period of time. But the amount of effort required is really incredible, and it cannot be done day in and day out without the child breaking down in some other way at some other time during the day. Finances. In 2019, over $500 billion was spent worldwide on advertising, and a good portion of that was to get you to do things that weren't in your self-interest. There are all kinds of ways that our finances can be screwed up by impulsivity, by getting some idea in our mind about something we have to buy, or by poor planning. Self-regulation is essential for financial health. Healthy eating. The same person can be eating really healthy part of the day and then lose it later. Usually, for most people, when they lose it when it comes to eating, it's later in the evening. There's debate as to why. One idea is that willpower is something that declines due to fatigue over time. I won't go into the details of that, but I'm sure that most people watching this are aware that self-regulation is an important factor in whether or not one eats healthy or not. And if you say, oh no, it's got to do with taste, I would answer that how we perceive food is to a significant extent under our own control if we know the techniques to use to learn to perceive differently. Self-regulation is extremely important for healthy aging. Now, some of the primary factors determining whether somebody has the physiology of a 55-year-old or the physiology of a 99-year-old is attitude, love, lifestyle, luck, and genes. I want you to see the guy in the upper right. He is well over 100 years old, and he just broke a world record for his age class on a long bicycle ride. The guy on the left is 82, and he competes in Ironman contests. He's a champion Ironman, which is a really tough kind of competition. Now, there's a huge difference between your calendar age and your physiological age. How you live your life is going to have a dramatic effect on what your physiological age is. And you can have multiple physiological ages depending on what organ system you're talking about. You say, oh no, it's all genes, and you got some reason why to say that. Well, my answer to that is yes, genes are a very, very powerful factor, but our attitude, our lifestyle, our diet impacts our genes. Genes are always operating the same way. They can be modulated, they can be turned on and off. Even broccoli affects which genes are functioning and what they're doing. Stress management. I'm going to give you an extreme example. I don't expect you're going to sit down and start meditating after this, but just know that there are many other stress management techniques that require less willpower. The Dalai Lama made a bet with the psychophysiologist Davidson at the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the psychophysiology lab. The Dalai Lama sent in a group of his best meditators, and they hooked them up to psychophysiological monitors, and they put headphones on them to produce a startle response. Now, what the acoustic startle response is when you blast somebody with a sound as loud as a gun going off a couple feet from your head, usually you jump. Now, one by one, the meditator would be all hooked up, and they'd move finger to signal when they were in deep meditation. And then Davidson's team would trigger the acoustic startle, the loud blast of the gun. Guess what happened? All you saw was a little flutter of their eyelids, where any other person would be jumping out of their seat involuntarily. That shows how powerful some stress management techniques can be. Mood management. Most non-drug treatments for depression involve some aspect of self-regulation. One example would be learning to modify the thoughts that go through most people's heads most of the time. That technique is called cognitive behavior therapy, learning to monitor your thinking, dispute thoughts, alter thoughts, etc. But there are many, many other aspects of mood management involving self-regulation, so such as activation therapy for depression is one example. Lots and lots of people, including me, make New Year's resolutions every year. And guess what? 80% of us fail. We fail not because of weak will, but because we don't understand the principles of self-regulation. I hope that you see from this how important self-regulation is.